Hi, Mark here from the Tangent-Bound Podcast Network and host of the flagship show, the Tangent-Bound Podcast. Did you know that we over at Tangent-Bound are always looking for amazing podcasts to promote? And did you also know that we are also proud nerds and geeks of everything from movies, music, gaming, TV shows, and comic books to wrestling, MMA, soccer, and football? Whatever you can nerd or geek out about, we've got it. And if you're interested, we can help you find it. And if you're a show looking for a place to call home, we've got you covered. Side effects may include upset stomach, dizziness, tumors, shakes, and in some rare cases, death from excessive laughter. Though to be fair, it's only sometimes. Other side effects may include diarrhea, gallstones, heart palpitations, and strong desire for cookies on the dark side. Talk to your doctor and visit TangentBoundNetwork.com and see if Tangent-Bound Network is right for you.
Sucks to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. A light sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time. Stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Welcome to the Crazy Life, everyone. My name's Jen. I am your hostess for the evening, and with me, as always, we have Brian and Hannah. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey, yo.
Hey, yo.
There, I got my reference. I got my wrestling reference in already.
Yes.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, how have you guys been? How has your week been?
Pretty darn good.
Pretty darn good? Oh,
Yeah.
I like good weeks. What's going on?
I celebrated 10 years of sobriety this week.
Awesome.
Awesome. Congratulations.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a very big deal.
And it was very different. I tend to go to a lot of meetings, and like we have special birthday meetings, and I didn't go to Friday nights, and there'll be one tomorrow night. I might go. I'm not sure, but I just basically went out and hung out with my dudes, and
Awesome.
there was a lot of new people in there. And what was really cool is some people that had been gone for a while and had come back. And one of the big deals, like, this is the point where complacency sets in for people, you know?
Sure.
You've done something for, you hit double digits. You've done something for a long time. You're like, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really tied in with like what I shared a couple episodes ago about, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough service within my own community kind of thing? And so, I shared about that a little bit, and then, it's a really wild thing to have a bunch of men, and I mean men from all ages, from early 20s to, 60, 70 years old, everything in between, and getting together at night and being honest with each other about what's going on in their lives and what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I still sit there and I go, this is weird to me. This is, it really is. And that's what happened is there's a lot of honesty, and those are the meetings I love the most. Those are the, that's like, there's no better group session than when people are just being honest about what's going on and where their shortcomings are.
Mm-hmm.
And saying it out loud in front of a bunch of other men and not being afraid to say, I was a jerk today, or I lied about something, and I need to not do that. Just all the stuff that we tend to suck up and just keep to ourselves kind of thing.
You're totally right. I do the same thing in therapy. So yeah, I get you.
And then to do it, and it's, I think having an experience like seeing a therapist helps a lot, or going to a rehab helps a lot, because you're amongst therapists and you're amongst other people that you learn that it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
I could see how it'd be very difficult for somebody who didn't have those experiences to come in and to open up. So when those people even open up, and it's that guy that's quiet all the time, and then all of a sudden just, lets loose a little bit, and you're just like, and there are times, like any type of group that, thank you, thanks for sharing, whatever. But there's times where everyone's like, thank you. Like, like where somebody just like laid out the truth, and you're like, wow, thank you for doing that. Whether it's moving or it's just being in the presence of somebody, it's just powerful. So I went out to dinner afterwards and got to catch up with, there were guys. This was there's a couple things that were really cool. One of them was when I walk in, the guy that's chairing the meeting is the guy that was chairing the meeting at my first meeting.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's cool.
That's pretty cool.
Which would be next Thursday. Right.
Right.
And it was like, I was like, okay, this is really neat. And the thing is, this guy happened to relapse. And when he relapsed, I was chairing the meeting the first time he came back in.
Ah.
And I knew, I thought there might have been something like that, but I wasn't quite sure. So at some point he basically mentions it. He says this is, and somebody else said something great. He's like, yeah, back in, Texas where I'm from, we always say, be nice to the newcomer, because you never know when they're going to be your sponsor. I was laughing, because anything can happen. And then another guy we had a guy from out of town, which I love always when someone comes in from out of town, because basically I hear the same stuff every single week, because we all know each other. And he says, I don't have alcoholism. I have alcoholism. I was like, somebody write that one down, please.
That's a new one. Yep.
Right.
But what inevitably happens is usually if I'm going to, some birthday meetings, I'll think a little bit about what I want to share at the meetings, and I start reflecting a lot, which is a good reason to go to these meetings, because it makes me kind of think about, it's just, I reflect on what happened and what my life's like now and what's important to me and that kind of stuff. And I just didn't want to do that so much this week. And as a matter of fact, when the day came, I got up and I was starting to get ready for work when all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, what day is it today? And I looked, I knew it was happening during the week, but I literally woke up and I hadn't even thought about it. Because the reality is it's just another day.
Yeah.
But it is significant. And then today I ran into my ex, who became my ex the night before, the night I got sober.
Fun.
And it was really wild to just see her today, because we were sitting there. I haven't seen her in a while, and we're just catching up. And just before I'll see you. I'll talk to you later. And I started to drive off I'm in a little golf cart, and I'm like, wait a minute. I spun around and I said, hey, by the way, I just wanted to say thank you. And it's wild because she happens to be working with a lot of other guys that are struggling to stay sober. And, and it was one of those, I'm glad I turned back around and talked to her, because that subject came back up. And, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know, I know, so-and-so and so-and-so. But she's like, well, there's this other guy, and I'm like, well, he happens to be my neighbor. I think he knows that I'm sober, but if you want to drop a little thing in his ear to say, if you ever, you can always come talk to me.
Right.
Actually, now that we're saying that, it's kind of neat, because here I am thinking about, can I be a more benefit to my community? And now I'm going, yeah, actually, I've had some opportunities this week, little things to be useful to somebody. So, that's why I try not to force things too much and let things happen.
Yeah.
There was one of the big deals with 12-step programs is making amends. And some people, when the whole idea of making amends came up, way back when there were multiple programs that had this idea of making amends. This was back in the 1920s, 1930s, where the community was small. Everybody knew each other, and it was pretty much in your interest to make it through the next day that you go out and settle scores.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right. And it was easy to do. I mean, you like, okay, this is what I'm doing today. And you go out and you make all these amends so that you can walk out of your house the next day, go to the grocery store, go to the bank, go to work, do your life. You had to take care of it. It's a little different now. I have connections all throughout the country, and some people I know, I've heard people that go everywhere. They will get on planes and fly, and they will just take care of it all. And then there was somebody else that one time just kind of shared with me his experience, which is, and this even includes some of his family, and this really blew me away. He says, I let it happen when it's supposed to happen. I don't force it. Because when it's supposed to happen, it's going to be a piece of cake. And that's been my experience, is that they're like, as long as I'm mentally prepared for it, meaning that I'm in a place where I want to do this, if the opportunity arises, it's like, it's like all of a sudden, like this light bulb goes off. I'm like, oh, I know what this moment is, and it ends up working perfectly. It's like, it's for some reason it seems to just be smoother. And I look at a lot of stuff like that too, as far as like, okay, do I need to be of more service to my, sobriety brothers and sisters, or, what do I need to do? And I'm always like, be willing, be ready, and the opportunity is going to arrive, for you. And, and that takes me back to where I started with this idea of complacency is I always need to be ready to be, I can't just sit back on my laurels and go, my life's really, because I shared this. I said, I'm really basking in the joy and the gratitude of being sober today. Yeah. I really am. My life is really good. But that can be a real crutch. If I start to do that, I am not staying active. And if I do have an opportunity, it's just like, it's like the muscle memory. You got to keep your chops up.
Yeah.
And so the Crazy Life podcast is one of the places I get to keep my chops up on a weekly basis. And I want to say thank you, because this is a way that I get to keep myself from becoming complacent. And I thank you guys for that.
You're welcome.
Nice. Yes.
Welcome.
That's my big week.
Nice.
That's a huge week. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is a really big week. Yeah.
That's, I can't tell you how cool it is that you have made it 10 years and you're doing so well. I know I can't even imagine how much hard work it was to get those 10 years in. So congratulations, man. That's really amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It really is, because most people don't commit 10 years to self-improvement.
Exactly.
Well, let alone anything like realistically, how many people even have a job for 10 years nowadays? One of my friends said the longest thing I'd ever committed to was high school. He's like, I didn't even make it through college. I did 4 years of high school, like relationships or whatever, so many of us that end up in my situation don't have really long track records of anything.
Yeah.
So like to say that this is the longest thing I've done consistently in my life. Mm-hmm. I happen to be one of those people that have had the same job for 15 years and then 10 years. But the reality is this is one of the longest things I've ever done consistently in my entire life. And that is not drink one day at a time.
Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing. And it's, I can't even fathom doing it. I hope that I could, given the circumstances, I'd rise to the occasion. I hope that I could be that strong, but I don't know. Hopefully I'll never have to find out, but
yeah.
So how about you, Brian? How you doing?
not too bad today, I guess, but, I told Tony, we recorded the, Salty Language on Friday, and I was telling Tony that this last week has just pretty much been like one long sinus headache for me. You know, it's like, I just wish this, like, and I look at this week and it's like, man, it's supposed to be pretty nice all week, but we're going to have off and on rain. It's like, it's like I forgot how much I hate this time of year, but I love it because it's finally starting to warm up a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just brutal for a little bit until things adjust. I mean, we had, what was it, twice last week? We had a day where we basically could have had snow one day and it was almost 70 the next day. You know? Yeah, it was, or within the last week and a half, something like that. We've had a couple of that, you know, so it's like, So looking at this week, seeing that we have like 2 or 3 70-degree days potentially this week with no snow in there, it's like, well, rain I can handle because that's still within the, you know, the same system basically, but when it gets to snow, then you've got, you know, hot air, then cold air, anyway. But, and it's, I know I say this a lot, but it's like, what it does is it's like I wake up and I'll have a terrible sinus headache. So then the only way to really get rid of it, I'll take a little medicine, but if that doesn't work, I go to sleep. So on those days, I end up just staying in bed all day. Well, when you have 3 or 4 of those in a week or more, it ends up being, wow, I've spent almost this whole week just lying in bed doing nothing.
Yeah.
And although it's like, well, I'm listening to my body, I'm taking care, you know, and because some of those headaches are so bad, my sinus headaches are pretty close to the level of the migraines that I get. They're terrible. And, you know, they pretty much just take me off my feet for most of the day. And like I said, you know, it's like, it sucks because you get to a point where it's like, God, I'm spending better than half the week just lying in bed in pain, you know, and it sucks. And that certainly doesn't help, you know, depression when all you can do is lie in bed, basically. You know, it's significantly, I mean, it's like a buffet for depression, you know, it's just, it's like, oh, all these, I'm just going to eat until I'm over full. And, so, yeah, that's been kind of rough all week because of that, but yeah. So, but today actually, you know, today was pretty decent. So, and, you know, it was a beautiful day outside today and, you know, got outside for a little bit, which was nice because, you know, I haven't been out much this past week. So getting out for a little bit was kind of nice. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do that a little more this week. I hope.
Absolutely.
And hopefully this won't kill my head.
Gorgeous. It's supposed to be gorgeous. Today was gorgeous.
Yeah, I know. It's like tomorrow's supposed to be warm again, but I think we have like chance of pretty strong thunderstorms tomorrow. So there's a good chance tomorrow's going to stink on ice for me, but you know, like I said, it's something I know is coming and stuff, and it's just frustrating. You know, it's just, that's all it is. And I know I gripe about it a lot, but it's because it really is what I'm going through. You know, it's not, I mean, Jen, you've seen it firsthand. It's just, I just physically can't do things sometimes because of it. So yeah, the next time I make a doctor's appointment, I'm going to talk to him again about it because it's so weird because I've been complaining about my sinuses to my doctors for years and they all don't, it's almost like they don't seem to take it seriously. You know, like they're all like, oh, here's a decongestant or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to be enough. Like I've tried everything that's, you know, well, let me rephrase. I've tried like all the over the counter stuff. You know, every time some new product comes out promising that it's the best ever, I'm like, sweet, let's see, you know, and, you know, but it stinks because, you know, the last time I was at the doctor, I kind of mentioned it. I was like, hey, you know, 6 months ago, I was put on some stuff. And then she said that, you know, when I came back in 6 months to to talk about it again. And he was kind of like, whatever, you know, like just so kind of dismissive of it. And it's like, look, if you're not going to, it's like, send me to an ENT, you know, ear, nose, and throat or something. At least let me get somebody who this is their specialty, because I've been reading all these things, not because I'm searching them out. It's just happened. I listened to a podcast where a guy talked about how he had horrible sinus issues all through his youth up until he was like 20, 25. Went into the doctor, got sent to an ear, nose, and throat, and they found out he actually had tumors in his sinuses.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like non-cancerous, but he had tumors in there. Once they removed them, he's like, I haven't had a problem since. You know?
Wow.
And he's like, but it's basically just a growth in your sinus cavity, so you can't breathe.
Yeah.
You know?
So you can't breathe.
And
yeah.
I've read other things where people have had similar issues. Now mine, I have one of the tubes that lead up your nose into your sinus cavity. One of mine is incredibly narrow, which is why I always feel like someone's pinching my nose a lot of the times when I go to breathe. So I don't know. I just, as we've talked on here before, and this is on me, is I need to be more assertive. You know, I need to not allow them to be dismissive to me about it. I need to go in there and basically, you know, raise a ruckus about how bad this is. Because I think that's what it is. I have a tendency, I'll go in there and I'll mention it and I'll talk about it, but I'm not in there like throwing myself on the floor like, about how bad it is. You know?
Exactly.
Like when I go in there, I'm like, look, 4 times a week I'm laying in bed and they're like, okay, well let's do this. Cause I'm calm about it. And I just explain it because I have a pretty good understanding of it. And I think that's to my detriment a lot when it comes to this. So anyone listening, there's a lesson to be learned there. I guess go in there and, flail around and talk about how horrible it is, and then you'll get more attention. I'm kidding. But I do.
Yes, not recommended.
I do need to make them understand that, on a 1 to 10 scale, these are not like 2 headaches. These are like 5 and 6 type headaches. That are.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Is really it. It's like if you came in there screaming in so much freaking pain, they'd go out of their way to figure out what's wrong with you.
Right.
But if you're just like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
They're going to think that you're good.
Now talking with people about migraines, and they're like, yeah, I go to the emergency room sometimes. And I was like, I've never thought to do that. Like, I just take some Excedrin or whatever. I get some cold compresses and I just go lie in bed. I've never once thought about, maybe I should go into the hospital to get, and I mean like on day 3 and 4 of a migraine, I've never been like, I should go to the hospital to get this taken care of, and some of these other people are like, oh yeah, when I get one like that, I just go in and they, give me strong stuff, and there's a whole process that they go through. And I was like, I never even thought of it. It's like, so that's the kind of person I've been with it, is I'll gripe about it, but I'm not the type to go constantly go to the hospital or doctor about it. So that's why I said it's on me. And this is using Heno's example of how to be proactive and such in this situation, is that recognizing, I'm looking internally to see what in the situation how I've affected it. And even if the doctor behaves the same way, I can change my behavior and be like, hey, that's not good enough. I've been dealing with these since I was like, 10 or 12. Like I'm 38, going to be 39 this year. This needs to get taken care of, because my quality of life has suffered for 20 plus years because of it. Yeah. So anyway, end rant.
And rant done.
Yeah. So, like I said, at least, I've looked at it, I've learned something from it too. Is that, like I said, it's on me to go in and tell them, because I'm truthful with them. I'm just not, like, I'm clearly not painting the picture of how bad it is well enough,
So interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my week, I am going to have to get rid of one of my kitty cats. So it was a little bit of a sad week. I did want to confession time. I have a bit of a confession. Sorry, folks. Brian was doing an imitation of one of the cats from the adoption commercial that's on TV.
One of the ones with like the Sarah McLachlan music playing in the background. There's one where like there's this kitten reaching through a cage with its paw out at the camera. And I've done that to Jen for years. Where like every once in a while I would do it.
Gets me every time.
Yeah.
Every time I see the commercial, it always makes me tear up.
Yeah.
So he's turned it into a gag.
I'm being a jerk. Yeah. I'm just throwing some guilt on her about having to get rid of the cat. That's all.
Yeah. Guilt.
Here, let me put some music on while you're telling the story.
Like do.
Yeah.
But yes, unfortunately, I do have to get rid of Mr. Max. I came to terms with the fact that I have 3 animals right now, and 3 animals is just too much for me to take care of. There's limits to what I can do and what I can commit to, and I kind of push my commitments. It's tough because one of the things, he demands his litter box to be cleaned daily or bi-daily.
You say that and I'm picturing him standing outside just like kicking things over, like, this isn't fresh.
Pretty much that's what he does. No. So he to most people, that's not a hard thing to do, not a tough request.
Yeah.
For me, it's another thing to do in my morning routine or my daily routine and stuff. And sometimes I have trouble going through my entire routine. So yeah, it just got out of hand. And the tough part is I do have a lot of guilt around it because yes, I can't really help it. I wish I knew for sure if it was a disease or just, I hate to say laziness, but I guess that would be a term to be used.
Yeah. Well, no, that's appropriate because that really is what it comes down to, is trying to determine if it's something you just don't want to do or something you can't do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of was brought me to our topic of the day, which I was joking with the guys and saying we should call it I am a jerk. Because how often, because of the disease or because of laziness or because of, life and stuff going on, we make decisions that, we are jerks. We become a jerk in the scenario. You agree to go to a wedding and they buy your plate of food and everything, and at the last minute, you just don't feel like going, so you don't go. It's kind of a jerky move, but we do it sometimes. Sometimes we can't help it because of the disease, and it brings a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt associated with that, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the guilt aspect of it. Mm. So, an article I found. There you go. 5 tips for dealing with guilt. It's amazing how quickly guilt can kick in for the smallest, most meaningless things in our lives. Guilt is an emotional warning sign that most people learn through their normal childhood social development. Its purpose is to let us know when we've done something wrong and to help us develop a better sense of behavior and how it affects ourselves and others. It prompts us to re-examine our behavior so that we don't end up making the same mistake twice. How can we combat our guilty feelings and accept them when they're not important, but let them go more easily when they're not? Accept them when they are important and let them go when they're not important. So you have to recognize the kind of guilt you have and its purpose. So guilt works best to help us grow and mature when our behavior has been offensive or hurtful to others or ourselves. If we feel guilty for saying something offensive to another person or for focusing on careers with an 80-hour work week, what? Where am I going with this?
I don't know.
All right, we'll skip that because they start going into a whole nother ball game there. Right. But basically, recognize the kind of guilt you have and its purpose. And so, basically, this is the basic guilt. That, you're pretty much just a blatant jerk. You say something wrong, you do something wrong, and you have guilt about it, so you have to take care of it. So, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and it's pretty basic. That's the first step, is owning it and saying, you know what, I've got guilt, and this is why I have guilt.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes I've got guilt, and I don't know why.
Well, that step is really important because you also have to be careful that you aren't projecting.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to think I'm a jerk, versus, it's different if someone actually calls you a jerk or gives you grief about it. Then it's different. Like, it's a different feeling. I'm not saying one is more justified than the other, but one is certainly on the distorted thinking worksheet. So,
right.
you know, and, that's why I said it's just important to make sure you're not feeling guilt because you think they're going to think you're a jerk. You know, like if you feel guilt, that's fine. I mean, that's a feeling you're going to have, but try to not put, you know, stuff on yourself.
Exactly.
I think that's why I like how it starts with, you know, what is guilt's purpose in a normal application?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is it there for? You know, how is it part of being a human being?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it frames it like it's an asset, you know, in our collection of tools.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it's a way that we can look and go, okay, yeah, that might not have been a good thing to do. Maybe I need to correct that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, versus a liability in it just becomes a tool to beat ourselves up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I like how it starts with like, okay, let's make a distinction here.
Yep.
Yeah. And it is a very, very healthy tool to use when used appropriately.
Yes.
So make amends or changes sooner rather than later. I think this is a great one.
Yep.
Because as soon as you start feeling guilt, if you can take action upon it, it'll really make things much better than if you let the guilt continue to grow and eat you up. So as soon as you recognize the reason you're feeling guilty, if you can act upon it, go for it. And get that taken care of and fix things to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
Some things can't be fixed, but do the best you can with what you got.
Well, and again, as we've talked
before.
Go ahead, Hanno.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's why we've talked on here before about, you know, you can only control your behaviors. If you apologize and you attempt, and actually we talked about it a while ago when Hanno was actually, I think we did the whole show on like amends and stuff. It was
that's it, yeah.
That concept of if you go out of your, or not out of your way, but if you do everything you can to try to make a situation right, sometimes it's just not enough, but that's okay. You did what you could do. And if the person says there's nothing you can do to make this okay, you just have to accept that sometimes, you know, and unfortunately you may feel guilt, but you know. And
that's with guilt, I find it's best to kind of, you let it set in, understand where it's coming from, understand why you have it. You know, you're going to take action and try to fix things that you can fix. And then once it's served its purpose and you've learned from it, you have to let it go.
Yeah.
It is really tough. Letting it go is tough because a lot of times we want to abuse ourselves and beat ourselves up over stuff. But
that's why the using the term amend for me is so important because that means change, and that goes to what you were just saying, Jen, and is like make changes before you have to make apologies. Is really what it comes down to. You know, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission, and that applies to us too. And that's what I kind of hear you know, this is what. It's not easy for us to ask ourselves permission to make changes. Like, okay, is it, you know, will you please let me be okay with not having this extra pet in the house? Is really the kind of the inner dialogue that really needs to happen. We don't do that. We don't, you know, whether you call it, marinating on it, meditating on it, or praying on it, to say, you know, can I, you know, please let me have the willingness to make a change in my life rather than saying, you know what, you're a jerk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's where we're kind of getting to here, which is really cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can absolutely see that. And it's weird because it's almost like we're treading on a few different things that I think could be really great conversations. For sure. But, just to kind of, I guess, get back to the article, but make amends or change sooner rather than later. Number 3 is accept you did something wrong, but move on.
Yeah.
I think that's something that it's a step that we forget or we have a hard time with.
Yeah.
Well, it's so hard because, it's that whole thing. It's like 5 seconds can last with you for 5 hours because our ego gets in the way of it. And and that's truly about just living in the moment. It's like, okay, well, you wish you could go right all the wrongs right now, but you can't. So that means you just need to be okay with it. And like you said, move on. What's the next indicated thing? What do you have to do right now? Because you're not gonna be able to fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that self-punishment that we have a hard time giving up.
Yeah.
We have a hard time.
Well, it's it's built into us from the time we're kids, like there's always been that negative stigma about people getting divorced. Like, oh, you should stick it out and work it out. There's, when you're a kid, if you get a pet, it's like, now you made that commitment, you have to stick it out. You have to, it's like, so the way we're kind of taught is almost like the commitment to something is an absolute. Like once you commit, there's no turning back. And it's
true.
When in actuality, people break commitments all the time,
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's because, as kids we're taught pretty much not just this, but a lot of stuff. It's black or white. It's wrong or it's right. That there's no gray area. And then as we age, we realize that most of life is actually gray area. It's not black or white.
Is black and white thinking? Is that on that list?
Oh yeah, it is. Exactly.
But you're bringing up a great point is like, there's very few places where I found that we have a right to be wrong. And that happens to be part of our recovery, my organization, is we have a right to be wrong. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
That you can make a decision, and if it turns out to not be, you get some information or whatever, something changes and it turns out to not be the right decision, it's okay. You can be wrong and then and fix it.
Yeah, that's growth.
But I think
that literally is growth.
That we can't, like you said, we're programmed that like, oh, you made your bed, you lie in it.
Yep.
And I'm like, and I just had somebody say this post this on Facebook, and I thought it was brilliant. It's like, you made your bed, lie in it. Well, no, there's another new set of sheets. Why don't I just put those on?
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes you're just not going to have a good reason why you offended someone, or it's easier to forgive yourself and get rid of the guilt when it wasn't premeditated or whatever. But sometimes you are just in these situations where you intend to insult someone, because they made you mad or whatever the reasoning may be, and you say what you want to say or you do what you're going to do. And after the fact, and dealing with that guilt and handling things after the fact can be even harder and learning from that can be almost even harder than the ones that, oops, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And, legitimate mistakes, not a intentional oops.
Well, it's a great point, because there's been plenty of times where I've made the comment that it's like, and it's a jerk comment, but it's the truth, to where it's like, I'm not sorry for what I've said. I'm sorry you were hurt by what I said, or that you were offended by what I said, but I meant what I said, kind of a situation. And those are really hard to get past because, you don't mean to. Sometimes you just say the truth and people get offended by it, and it's like, I'm sorry you're offended by that, but that's how it is, kind of a thing. It's similar to like sometimes you make the best decision for you and it makes someone else mad. It's just gonna happen, and it's like, well, I'm sorry that bothers you, but I had to do, I had to make that decision for myself. And that's where this gets really tough when you start tying mental illness into it, because there's a lot of times that I've not been able to go to something because my anxiety or my depression basically just, lock the door and or hold you down in bed or whatever it is. And it's it's hard to get people to understand that, because they see it at times as a rejection. And this isn't me projecting. I've been told these things, so it's, people see it as a rejection because you keep telling them no, and it isn't that you're trying to reject them. You're not trying to, they don't understand that, like, the mental illness is trying to get you to reject everyone, not just them or, it's trying to get you to reject everybody. It wants you to be alone, as we've talked plenty on here about. And this is where it gets to be a problem, because after a while you get labeled a jerk because you never show up. You say you're going to be there and then you don't come. People make plans for you and then, like you said earlier, for a wedding or something, they've, in fairness though, tons of people don't go to weddings. There's rarely ever a wedding where they plan for 150 guests and all 150 show up. There's almost always groups that don't show. But it's still the same idea in that you could feel guilty, like, oh man, they bought plate, they paid for food and, a share of food and booze basically, and the cake was for me and, those kind of deals. But at the time though, it's like when I'm sitting in my room and my depression is the only thing in the room with me, I'm making decisions based on what's going on right in front of me. That doesn't allow me to think outside of the room. So it's where it's so important, as we've talked on here before, when your rules have changed, like on a normal day, if you felt normal, I'm again using a word I hate, but you'd go do these things. You'd want to be there with your friends and share in these times. But on these days, the rules have changed. So you need to make sure as a person that you're, telling them, and this goes into the amends part, because down the road, if it happens again, they'll understand over time, hey, this sometimes just happens. It sucks for everybody. Like, I don't want to sit in a dark room. Like, that's not what I want to do. I would rather be out having fun with my friends. But some days you just can't, Yeah. So that's why I said, that's where tying these two together becomes, it can become a very powerful beast, because you can have the guilt tying in and escalating, because a lot of times with depression, whatever, you have guilt anyway, for this stuff. Like, you just feel guilty, or you're a burden, or you're a waste, or whatever. And then this is adding to it. So it's really piling on. So it can, and then that can create more of a cycle. And, again, it feeds itself. It's a snake eating its own tail. So, yeah. All right. And rant again.
Nothing wrong with those tonight, for sure. Lots of great information. Number 4 on this is learning from our behaviors. So unfortunately, folks, we do have to learn. Learn, grow. It's, it's always a constant battle to better ourselves, to learn, to grow, to continuously try to morph into a better us, a better you, a better me. It's tiring, but it's necessary.
Yeah. It is. And plus, learning from it allows you to, like I was just saying, when you realize that this is going to happen, kind of a thing, if you're doing it because of a mental illness or something, or a physical illness, whatever it is, by telling people, you've learned, like, hey, when I make these decisions, it can hurt other people. So in the future, if I'm having a bad day or whatever, I'm going to tell them that this is, I'm going to be honest about it. And it's what you have to do to help make your own peace with things. And it also allows you to kind of stave off that guilt a little bit, some of that guilt, to help you in your process. So, and like I said, if they're good friends, they will understand. It's a really good way to find out who's on your team.
It's true.
Who's your support system?
Yeah, it's like if you tell your friends, hey, I couldn't because, I physically couldn't get out of bed today, and they're like, jerk, and meaning it, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to have a re-examination of our friendship here, because,
Right.
Yeah.
So, And the last one on here I think is incredibly important because very seldom do we ever take this into consideration, is perfection doesn't exist in anyone. But yet we try to hold ourselves to our set of standards. We have to be perfect in every way, shape, or form and meet every single one of our standards every single day, every single moment. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, it's not going to happen, folks. Yep. And everybody's set of standards and everybody's, idea of who they want to be is different. We all have our own set of goals and dreams and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. But the one thing we all have in common is we want to succeed and we want to be the best we can possibly be at them. And some days you fall a little short and it's okay.
Yeah. It is. Like you said, there is no such thing as perfection. So it's really, it's like when we talked about happiness and going for happy-ish instead of happiness, because you can have moments of happiness, but there's really no such thing as like a constant happy. Like there's no, if you're in a place where you're constantly happy, you're probably in a manic state or something to that effect. Like you're probably running in an area that's not good for you. Similar to depression. If you're running in a state that is always really down, that is not good for you. You need to move around on the scale a little bit. So it also helps you appreciate different things. But aiming for perfection is just, it's a fool's errand because, there's nothing wrong with having goals just out of your reach, but they still need to be realistic, Yeah.
Right.
And, because, because it can lead into you feeling like a failure all the time too. If you're constantly trying to meet what, expectations, or worse yet, what you perceive as others' expectations of you, you will never be happy with it, And, there's all sorts of stuff on that anyways about, chasing happiness and stuff, that it's a tough thing to do. And instead of worrying about that big picture happiness, just learn to live in the moment. And when you find a happy moment, just enjoy that moment. And then you realize that those moments will keep coming back to you at times. It's why, we've talked on here about how going through things and seeing yourself succeed and then recognizing that was a win. It's why we talk about the little wins. Cause then when you look across the day and go, this wasn't that good of a day, but if you sit down and journaled your day and go, wow, you know what? All this stuff, man, I actually had a pretty good day today, but we don't do that. We tend to remember the big stuff, big wins, big losses, and we kind of tend to overlook the little stuff. And the little stuff is the better place to put your, to put the weight, the big stuff is just too hard of an errand.
What's the thing on the distorted thinking list about doom and gloom scenarios? I can't remember what they call it. Catastrophic thinking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's complete. That's always looking at the worst of everything and disregarding, the positives, or just constantly looking at the negative side of everything.
Yep. And that's all you're going to do if you're chasing perfection.
Because you always look on the bright side, like you do.
Yep.
Gotta love it. So I joke, but yes, you do. You have to try to find those happy points and be proud of yourself for the good moments that you have, and deal with the guilt. Process it, accept it, make sure you appropriate it to the right area, and let it go.
Yeah.
Always keep it in perspective. I think that's something we haven't talked about yet.
That's kind of where I was just going to mention. Yep.
Yeah. Keep things in perspective. You making a typo on an important report, when you look in the scheme of things, is put that up against, a Super Bowl coach making the wrong decision in the last 4 minutes or the last 4 seconds of the game.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big oops he made.
Yeah.
Yours, not so big of an oops in the scheme of things.
Still could be, but yeah.
Still could be an oops.
Yeah.
Bigger oops, but yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Millions and millions of people have watched his oops.
Yeah.
Your oops, maybe a handful of people know about it.
Yeah.
Could be worse, folks.
Right. Well, and sometimes, like I kind of mentioned earlier, it's like when we assign guilt to ourselves, sometimes this is why I was like, you have to be careful that you're not projecting others' feelings on you, because there's so many times where we do something and we think that we've hurt or offended someone else. And then when you apologize for it, how many times have you done something like that where it just eats you alive all night? The next day you're like, I have to go talk to them. And you go talk to them and they're like, oh, all right. Yeah. Like I totally forgot about it.
You're like, that thing I said, like, what thing?
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, I don't even remember.
That's that thing where it's like, and that's the thing to remember is that everybody else is also in their own heads.
Exactly.
And that 20-second experience of yours that you're holding on for the next 20 hours, they forgot about a minute later, because guess what? They started thinking about themselves like we all do.
Right.
Because you know what? You're not that important.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a good point.
Yep. And that's why I said, like you have to be so careful assigning guilt to yourself, because there's that angle to it. And then there's also the fact that, like I was saying, sometimes you make, every time a situation's put in front of you, we tend to try to make the best decision we can at the moment. We're gonna screw up, like Heno said. We have the right to be wrong. We will screw up. There's no if. It's we will. And sometimes you make the best decision you can make, and like I said, people are gonna get hurt. And sometimes that's not on you. Sometimes that's because they've assigned you with too lofty of expectations, and because if you take two people and both of them use distorted thinking, they're both wrong, or they may not be wrong. One might be right, one, you know what I mean? Like, there's always those situations too. So just be careful how much guilt you assign to yourself immediately before you take a good look at it. Again, as we've always mentioned on here, look at your role in it. What did you have to do with it? Could you have altered it to where maybe they wouldn't have gotten hurt? Because that's where you learn for next time, especially if it's someone you're going to interact with over and over again, So it's just really, it's applying not just the stuff in that article, but a lot of the stuff we talk about regularly on here to really help yourself. And again, I know we've mentioned the distorted thinking, but again, that's how important this stuff is. It's how common it is, and I only bring it up all the time basically, because I want to point out to people how easily our thinking just switches the wrong way. It isn't just mental illness that this happens to. People do this all the time. And if we're all aware of it, then we can all try to, strive for better. And fail. No.
Be the best you can be.
Yeah.
In the army? No, maybe not. That being said, I don't know, guys. What do you think? Are we good, or we want to talk some more?
Well, I want to turn this back around on you. With all that said, what are you going to do this week to get out of I'm a jerk?
Oh, nice. I like it. Applied learning.
Damn homework.
Yeah. I know, hit you with the old pop quiz. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
It ain't open book.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is, I'm actively trying to find a home that's better suited for him. And I'm working through a lot of understanding where and why. It's like where I went wrong, why I went wrong, and how I can prevent from happening in the future. So I'm putting together some goals for myself around, because I do still have another cat. I have 2 cats and a dog right now. So the other cat and the dog, are still going to be living with us. So, but the other cat, Frankie, is a little bit easier, more laid back. He doesn't have quite as stringent of demands as Max does. He won't pick at me, thankfully. So
now,
that's what my goals are.
Have you also applied this to other areas of your life to see, like, because, you know, we talked earlier, like, whether this is something you just didn't want to do versus something you can't do. Are you noticing other areas of your life where what would be considered a mundane or an easy task is too much for you?
Yes. Some days, you know, but a lot of it, the tricky part is it's a lot of housework and house stuff. Okay. I found with the new house that I'm having a hard time keeping on a normal schedule, a schedule with it. Mm-hmm. You know, keeping up with laundry, keeping up with the dishes, keeping up with, you know, cleaning on a regular basis.
Now, I mean, to be fair, that is pretty common. A lot of people have trouble with all that stuff. Have you noticed anything? I don't know how to word it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Is it enough at this point that you would feel that you should talk to your doctor about it?
I don't think so, because I think I'm in a transitional stage, and I've been in a transitional stage for a while now.
Yeah, that's true.
So, which makes things very difficult, but I am still in that transitional phase that I don't really think increase in medicine would be the right road.
Okay, I wasn't necessarily even meaning that. I just, you know, because sometimes just maybe it's you know, you need therapy or something, or just maybe there's some concern. This is why, the reason I bring this up is I just kind of wanted to point out to everybody, like, when we talk about doing the work and stuff, this is another great example of why doing that work regularly is important, because even though Jen's in this transitional stage, it's a point where she's got to be careful that she notices changes in her behaviors, you know, because you don't want to let it go too far to where, you know, the next thing you know, you're just in bed all the time. You're not doing anything you would normally do or want to do, you know, like those kind of things. You're just trying to make sure that you don't, like, you know, go downhill with it. You know, if it's, like you said, transitional stuff, everything's in a state of flux, perfectly normal, I would say, you know, and understandable. But if after a while you realize that it's still going on and stuff like that, it's like maybe then it's more mental illness than it is, I don't want to call it laziness, but, you know, being overwhelmed just from the transition.
Life.
Yeah, that's why I said it's I just wanted to point that out, because it's, we get a lot of those opportunities with us three doing this podcast where something will happen and we can be like, this right here, you know, like this is one of those moments where we're trying to point out that it's an important, it can be a turning point, you know, because everything could be essentially fine, but just in a state of flux. Again, happens all the time to people. But like with me having depression, this could be a very dangerous area. You know, because I could immediately just and go downhill big time. And that's why I was pointing it out. So people can kind of maybe see it and go, I had something similar, and it, you know, raises a flag down the road. Or maybe they're listening and they have someone in their life where they've seen this happen, and now they can recognize one of the red flags.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of work to do. Which I don't like work, obviously.
Come on. Heno's put 10 years into this. Come on. No.
Well, I think, but I think where you're getting at is the work that we all can do. And that's kind of pick and choose your battles.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, if it's you know, there are battles that we need to step up to. And if we can't, if we don't have the energy to do so because we've been letting all the little skirmishes sap us, then maybe we need to take a look at that and go, you know, I need to simplify some things. I need to make life a little easier for myself.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we did, what my husband and I sat down and talked, and we came up with is it's time to simplify things just a little bit more and to take a step back a little bit and just kind of see how that works.
Right. It's why, like, the video stores I worked at, like, the cleaning schedule for those is each day one part of the store or one major task gets accomplished. Mm-hmm. That way you're not looking at 6 in one day or even 3 or whatever. You just go, okay, tonight we need to vacuum the whole store. Tomorrow we're going to clean these shelves. Then the next day we're going to clean these shelves. And across the week as it rotates, by the time you're done, you've cleaned the whole place. And of course you're going to have to, it's a cycle, but it never seems totally overwhelming, and it makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of people that do that where they'll break down different tasks that need to be done. Like they won't, they'll wash the dishes tonight, but they won't put them away, or they won't dry them and put them away. They'll just put them in a dish rack and okay. Or the one will do it and then the next day the other one will put them away or something like that. Just kind of that way neither one of you is doing a ton of anything and it, so there's always those kind of things out there to do too, to help, with the feeling of overwhelming, or being overwhelmed, I mean.
And I think one of the hardest things to do is to truly look at these kinds of things as no different than an inventory of a business. It's you don't need to judge it, and that's where I think where we start to feel like I'm a jerk because you start putting judgment on it when it's really just you're taking stock of what you have and you're saying we have too much of this and not enough of that.
Yeah.
And you just need to make the adjustment. And it's that simple. Mm-hmm. And, there's a time to put some emotion on it. But then, I think just as human beings, we have a tendency to dwell too long on things we don't need to.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes down to, and this is really about making changes in our lives and changes that we feel like, okay, I should, I'm going through, actually I had one thing that kind of came up for me this week. It was, I've been talking a lot about money, right? And that's one of the things that I need to make some serious changes here and not beat myself up of how I got here because it's weird how in this case, I'm so used to beating myself up. I'm going right there right away, right?
Yep.
Like you're a dummy. You got yourself into this. And something that hit me this week is like, oh yeah, I decided at the beginning of the year to put more money into my retirement.
Oh,
that's why I don't have as much every check.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Okay, no, you don't beat yourself up over that.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's the thing. I can undo that decision if I need to.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd forgotten about it. And here I am like literally beating myself up over, you're a moron and all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. I made an active decision to do something for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
For my future.
And now I'm beating myself up for it. Like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
Like, I did something good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where I think, like, okay, this is one of those places where I could probably do some writing on this. Because then I write it down and it's there to remember.
Yeah.
Because me in my head, I have a well-trained forgetter. I just do.
So do I. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. So that's it totally. I was like, oh, I want to talk about that on the show this week because I was like, oh, how did you forget that?
Right.
Exactly.
It's so easy to do, though. I did that for a while when I was paying into a 401k. Like we signed the paperwork in like January, February, something like that. But it was for like 3 months down the road or something like that. It's when it was going to kick in, right? Or whatever it was. I forgot how it worked. It was done basically on like a quarterly thing or something, So whenever the next fiscal quarter started, that's when it was going to happen. And, by the time it started, I had totally forgotten about it, So I did the same thing. I'm looking at my check going, why am I making less money? Something's not, and I called payroll and I'm like, hey, I'm getting
like something new.
And they're like, oh, well, 401k. And I was like, oh yeah, right. I forgot. I agreed to put whatever the maximum at the time was because, I was super young. So I was like, I can live on the rest. And, why not sock away what I can while I can? Because, life changes. You never know. So yeah, that was, I did the same thing. I forgot about it and I felt pretty dumb about it. So, I hear you.
Yeah. And that's that's going to be my intention for this week is, besides finishing my taxes I'm not writing everything down. I'm so focused on my debt. It's so easy. And this really ties in this episode perfectly. I get focused on the negative thing about my finances, and I stop but I don't write down the positive things about my finances. Mm-hmm. Right. And that was the thing that I when I was doing some money, when I was involved with a group that was dealing with money issues and debt issues, that was one of the things that they reminded me. It's don't just write down your liabilities, write down your assets too. So you have some things to feel good about.
Yep.
Write down the fact that you do contribute so much to your retirement every month.
Yeah. Visualize the successes. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what I need to do this week is write the things down to get a perspective. And that includes the good things, not just the negative things.
That actually reminds me of something I wanted to say earlier, which was, we've talked on the show before about, and I mentioned it and Heno just mentioned it, about essentially journaling. About like if you're doing like gratefulness lists, or even if you're not, like I mentioned, like I used to do in high school, where I would write in a journal each day, and then at the bottom I would force myself to at least put one thing that was good that happened or was grateful for or whatever. So if you're finding that you have guilt towards something, do something like that, but then change your focus to where you make yourself write 1 to 3 things that you did well toward that goal, or ways that you learn from it, things to not do in the future, something that puts a positive spin on it. Because I think when you do that, that'll also help alleviate the guilt. Because again,
good idea.
Yeah, we've all screwed up. Like, you're doing math problems. You screw up on one, they're like, hey, that's wrong. And then you learn the right way to do it, and then you don't make that mistake again. So kind of the same thing. You take notes on how to do it so you don't make the mistake again. Similar idea. Plus, like I said, it's just everything that we do. It's like, every time I go to therapy, when I'm talking with her, a lot of times the first thing she'll do is be like, okay, how can we turn this to where your brain is looking at the positive, not the negative? Mm-hmm. Or even if you still look at the negative, you're also looking at the positive, because
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking at only one or the other can sometimes be detrimental also. Like, oh, I want to get a new microphone. I'm only looking at the reasons I should get it, not the reasons I shouldn't get it. Not really responsible. So, yeah. Sorry, Heno, I didn't mean I wasn't pointing at you when I was saying that. I just, I'm looking at a microphone.
Oh, no,
All right. Yeah. I didn't want you to think I was singling you out there.
No, you okay. May. That's.
I was like, I can find it. I can use myself. I have plenty of examples. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, that being said, how we think, guys? We're good?
Yep. I got one thing I want to talk about real quick before we get into the end business. Yeah. And I was listening to, the Tim Ferriss show last night, and it really pertains to this show a lot. Like, there's so many things, little tips that are offered on his show. One of them I listened to last night was, he was talking about, I think it was a podcast or something that was called like The Making of Oprah. And it talked about like her philosophies and how she got to where she got. And, one of the things that she was really big on is, it was that, and I've heard this elsewhere too. It's not like this is her thing, but, that like there's only 2 emotions, which are, what is it? Happiness and fear, I think it is. And, basically learning kind of which column things go into and how you react to it. And when he was talking about this, he was talking about different words, like people were writing in questions in him, and he was talking about how, like, there were some of the things where people used one phrase, and he goes, well, I really don't like that phrase, and he'd tell you why, and be like, I prefer to use this. And when you listen to that, you're like, he's turning it so that it's something he can grow from. The other is purely negative, and it's essentially a ceiling. What he's giving you is a floor. And there's a huge difference in those two if you want to be successful at whatever it is you want to be successful at. Is learning to build floors, not ceilings. And anyway, but there were a few episodes I listened to, but so many of his episodes have great just life tips. Because he talks to people who are the best there is at what they do. And they, and he tries to get into their head. Like, why do you behave this way? Why do you do things this way? So that, you know, he's basically, his concept is thrown off at the wall and people out there will just take what they need from it, you know? One I listened to, and this one really hit home for me because, it had a woman on it named Debbie Millman. And, she has a podcast called Design Matters, which was the first and longest running podcast about like design. And, she's been a graphic designer. She was the president emeritus of, AIGA, which is the American Institute of Graphic Arts, which is a huge, you know, if you're in graphic design stuff, it's a big, you know, it's like the big body basically. She's written books, she teaches classes, you know, anyway, so at one point they talked about how the firm she worked for basically had their hands in about 80% of the packaging you saw in a store. So this woman is just massive, but she talked about in different times in her life how she got an opportunity that the only reason she took it was, because she thought if I don't take this, they may never offer me another chance. So she just went for it. And and there were a couple times where that didn't work out, but then like one time she got an opportunity to have lunch with she was on a show called, what was it? It was basically done like Iron Chef, but it was with graphic designers. Like to where they were giving it a task and they had X amount of time and they had to design something. And then the guy who was the judge of it is like the most respected judge of this kind of, or critic of graphic design like ever, basically. Well, this guy, she went out to lunch with him after this. She didn't want to do this show, but she did it as a favor for someone. And by doing it, she ended up having lunch with this guy, pitched him on a couple book ideas she had, and he was like, yeah, those aren't good ideas. And she's like, I was kind of downtrodden a bit afterward, but then and then a little bit while down the road, she got a phone call from a book company that said, hey, this guy recommended you. Here's what we want to do. We need someone to do this book. So she got an opportunity because, like, if you dial it all the way back to her friend, like, she did something that she was kind of like, about doing, but it ended up paying dividends down the road. And she gives multiple examples of it and how some of the really negative stuff in her life actually turned into the catalyst for the biggest things in her life. And I thought it was a really, really great, it's a long podcast though. It's like a 2-hour podcast. And, but there's a lot of really good information in there. And just her attitude about things, cause she talked different times about, one thing she went to, they asked her for, references or whatever, or not references, like examples of her work. So she turned it in and got rejected. And she goes, she's like, basically they weren't telling me no forever. They were just saying no right now.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it.
And she's like, but at the time she saw it as a no forever.
Yeah.
So she shifted and went a different way. And it's just, like I said, she's a woman who has worked in a lot of different stuff. She helped rebrand Star Wars and Burger King.
Wow.
So yeah, she's a big time person in this. I've never heard of her because I don't keep up on graphic design stuff anymore. But like I said, anyway, I thought it was a really good podcast and especially to recommend for this show, cause there's a lot of really, really good stuff in there. And again, as I said before, Tim Ferriss's show is just a good podcast to listen to. I pick and choose a lot of times. But there's been some where I didn't think I was going to be interested. And by the end of it, I'm like, wow, I learned a lot in this episode. Like just little, tips and tricks from people of how to keep things off of you, how to be more creative, how to, just little stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome.
And rant
that
3.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. Real quick, I'll have the link in the show notes, but it's episode 214 called How to Design a Life, which is a great name for the podcast. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with that, we good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I am.
So if you want to continue the conversation with us, we have all sorts of great topics and wonderful stuff we talked about this week. So you can reach us at our email, Crazy Life Podcast at outlook.com, our webpage at the Crazy Life Podcast.weebly.com, or you can reach me at Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life, and that's Jen with a G. And Henno, how about you?
Find me on Twitter at Ida Henno, and find me on Facebook at Henno Heider.
Nice. Brian?
You can also find the show on Twitter at the Crazy Life Pod. You can find me on Twitter at Stunami. You can find the other podcast that I'm on, which is Salty Language, which is a very not safe for work podcast, at salty_language or at saltylanguage.com. I forgot what I was going to say next. Oh, our Facebook group can be found at facebook.com/group/Crazy Life Podcast. We are part of the Tangent Bound Network, which can be found at tangentboundnetwork.com. So, if you get a chance, swing by there and have a look at, there's a whole bunch of shows on there, and there's a player, or at least there was. I don't know. I know Mark was talking about changing the stuff around a little bit, but anyway. And then, if you'd like to help the show out a little bit, if you're on iTunes, please leave us a review, subscribe, and, however it is that you get us, whether it's through Stitcher or iTunes or some other podcast app, please share with your friends. If there's something about our show that you like, maybe, if you got a second, write a Facebook post or something, whatever. We would greatly appreciate it. But we appreciate you either way. And then time for rant 4. No, we're not doctors, therapists, or trained professionals. Just 3 people sharing our experiences. If you feel that you need help, please reach out to someone, whether it's someone in your support system or a medical professional, to help, get you on a good path here. Please don't self-diagnose. There's nothing wrong with, researching a little bit, but don't try to self-diagnose or, anything like that. Go talk to someone, like I've said before, go get the estimate,
Mm-hmm.
Go in and get the estimate on you and see what's said, and then go from there. And then, of course, if you're feeling, homicidal, suicidal, or anything of those kind of feelings, again, please reach out to someone in your support system, or, call 911, call your doctor. If your insurance has a number on the back, do that, or call the suicide prevention hotline number. There's a lot of good resources over at our Facebook page that, handle this kind of thing. So check that out, or hit one of us up if you need to. But please don't act on it. And again, I always remind you, just even in the planning stages, if you're writing a note, if you're planning on how you would do it, that's the time to go talk to someone. Don't wait until it's too late. Please don't act on it. Negatively, that is, act on it by going and getting help. And
right.
Yeah. And then lastly, as I always ask everyone, please reach out to somebody this week. Tell them you appreciate them. Or like Henno said, saying thank you to me and Jen for what, he feels, thankful for. Just let someone know that you appreciate them, that you love them, whatever it is, because you just don't know when that might make their day. It might save their life. You just never know. Plus, there's just nothing wrong with it. It just makes us better as a people if we all do that a little bit more. So there you go. End rant.
All right, folks. Well, with that, remember, keep wiggling your toes. I forgot what I was going to say there for a minute there. So keep wiggling your toes. Keep breathing. And have a good week, everyone.